Hi folks, this is Melvin from Opto Productions, and in this video I want to show you how to make a deep house track in Ableton. Okay, so I'm starting entirely from scratch, and the first thing I'm gonna do is load up the drum synths I talked about in the last video. I'll add a drum rack first, and then I'm gonna start with the kick. Okay, so the length can be quite short, and to keep it simple, I'll keep the key in A. Okay, then I'm gonna add a clap. And what I usually do is I'll take a utility plugin and put this after the drum rack, so we can easily turn down everything. And then I can keep the fader in the mixer at 0, where it has a finer resolution. But let's lower the clap a bit. The kick is usually the loudest element in a drum mix. Then let's add a hi-hat. I do want to lower the tempo a bit, probably around 118 or so. Let's turn down the hi-hat. Okay, we'll add more drums in a bit, but for now let's add a piano. And I'll also add a utility here. And by the way, I can just save this as a default preset by right-clicking and choosing Save as Default Preset. Okay, let's try something. I'm not going to quantize this completely. Let's change the quantize to 1/16 and let's set this to 60%. I only want to trim the start, and you'll see that it starts at bar 2, but we can also right click and choose set 111 here, and now it starts at bar 1. Adjust the clip range. I do want to turn down the velocity for everything, so Ctrl A or Command A, hold down Alt and turn down the notes. Maybe I'll lower this note an octave, and I can do this with the arrow buttons. Or, if I hold down Shift, it will automatically jump an octave. But this might be too low, then it's interfering with the bass. So let's add a bass first. I think I'll use analog. We're just gonna make a really simple bass line for now. I'll just follow the root notes. A, F, G and D. I'll add a color. So really simple, one note per measure. And then right here I can click duplicate to lengthen it, duplicate again. So 4 bars. Oh, and I'll turn down the level a bit, but in this case I've got a volume knob over here. I just need to make sure it starts a bit earlier over here. One thing I'd like to do is to occasionally leave a small gap, so we've got some room to breathe. So a tiny gap to make some space, and now it blends in with the piano. Okay, let's change the sound. I've got a sawtooth, but I'm gonna change that to a sine wave. We've got 2 oscillators, but let me just disable the second one. We barely hear it right now, and that's because we need to tweak the envelope a little bit. You'll see it starts out loud and then it gets quieter over time. So we just need to turn up the sustain amount so the level stays the same. Okay, well in this case I do want to add oscillator 2. Now change it to a sine wave, but turn it down 1 octave. You probably won't hear this unless you have really good headphones or speakers. And that's because the sine wave is one single tone. Let me show you this by adding an EQ8. And this is much harder to hear than a sawtooth, for example. And that's because all of these harmonics. And this one we can barely hear, because it doesn't have harmonics. Well, actually, it has two. Really quiet. But we can fix this issue in two ways. In the filter, we've got a drive option, so we can add some distortion. It's already set to symmetrical, but we can also choose symmetrical number 2. And this will increase the number of harmonics. And the more harmonics, the easier it is to hear it. Okay, so this is one way, the additive way, by adding harmonics. But we can also do it the other way around, by starting out with a saw wave and then just remove high frequencies by filtering. If I close the filter completely, we basically end up with the same result. But we can open it up slightly for something in between. But I think I'll go for the first method, so a sine with a little bit of drive. And because we've got two oscillators, I can turn down this one. Okay, let's immediately add some sidechain compression. We'll add a compressor. Click on this arrow and turn on sidechain. And then under audio from, I can select the drum rack. And below that I can select the channel, because we've got different drum sounds to choose from. Drum rack and the kick drum, and then I want it pre-effect, so the dry sound. Well, then turn down the threshold right below the peaks. I usually leave the attack at the 1, but we can increase the release a bit. Oh, and by the way, I'll set this to peak, otherwise it will react to the average signal level, and that's not what we want. Well, then I just need to turn up the volume, and we can do that right here. Let's compare. Okay, well, we can do the same thing for the piano. So I'll just copy and paste the plugin. That's a bit too much. I'll reduce the ratio and turn up the threshold. And I think I'll add an auto filter behind it, so we can darken the sound a bit. And later on we can automate this, of course. Okay, that works. What more can we add? Maybe we can introduce some more drums. And I'll just make this blue. I usually use the same colors for a project. That makes it easier for me to find everything. We can add a snare. I'm just gonna duplicate the pattern. And I'll probably use the snare on the end somewhere. I'll just loop this section so it gets a bit easier to hear. And I'll solo the snare. Okay, well, that's a sort of accent. Okay, and then what I usually do is I'm gonna look up some samples. In deep house music, shakers are often used, and that actually applies to any genre. And I usually use this one, the Noise Firm Complete Shaker and Tambourine Pack, and this really is my go-to for any production. I'll just search for RH, right hand, 4/4 time and 16th notes, and I believe it will follow the tempo. Yes, it does. I'll just turn down the preview volume, and you can do that right here. Okay, let's use this one for example. Oh, and I'll turn down the volume again. The more tracks you add, the higher the total volume will be. So if you take a look at the master, we're already at -10. Okay, I think I'll add another one. I usually use 2 contrasting sounds. Right now we've got a soft one. Yeah, let's take this one. And we can pan the two, one left and one right. Let's see if we can add some percussion. Maybe there are some packs we can use. Yeah, let's download this one. Loopmasters mixtape. Okay, I installed the pack and I also installed the one above it, Latin percussion. Let's check that one first. Let's see if we can find anything that's really played live. The disadvantage of these separate hits is that you're missing out on the groove. Let's take this and let's see if we can find another one. I'm just gonna search for a second. Yeah, I'll take this one. Okay, I'm just gonna switch to the arrangement. Before I do that, I'll turn down the volume. So I select all the clips, I press tab, and I make sure I put everything in the right spot, like that. And then I'll click on the orange back to arrangement button, so I can make everything active. I'll copy and paste the drums, and let's loop 2 bars. Oh, one thing at once. So first a new conga loop. I usually try to make a little variation, and we can easily do this by just trimming off the end. And we can of course duplicate this. And a trick I usually use is to right click and choose consolidate. And this turns it into a new clip, which we can easily copy and paste. Okay, let's check out the other loop. This one's a bit looser. I'll just cut out the second half. 4 bars is plenty. Yeah, so here it gets a bit messy. And we can of course easily tweak this. So what we can do, you can see these little gray triangles. So if I hover my mouse over there, an arrow will appear. Now if I double click, I create a new warp marker. And this allows me to stretch the sound. But if I move it like this, everything will move. And that's not what I want. So if I double click here and here, we limit the range of where we can time warp. So now I can move this one without issues. Well, if you notice that it doesn't really work, we can of course always just copy and paste a bit. I think I'll just take a piece from over here. Select, copy and paste. And I can do the same thing here. Select everything, consolidate. Oh, and we can turn the level down a bit. And what I usually do with percussion is I remove a lot of information. And we can do that with EQ, EQ 8. So I'll get rid of some lows and set this to a high pass filter. And also remove some highs. We really don't need these higher and lower frequencies. Because you can hear some shakers in the top end. Well, we've already got those, so that's not necessary. And this frequency I might remove. That's of course just the fundamental of the drum, but we can tone it down a bit. So I'm really focusing the percussion on a small area. And this leaves plenty of room for the other sounds. So if we check the other one. Well, this one doesn't have much highs to begin with. But I can remove some, just to be sure. But you can already see there's not much information. And now both percussion loops are also matched more closely. And I can pan them. Okay, I also want to add some reverb. A short reverb to put all the sounds into one acoustic space. I'll just name it room reverb. I usually max out the Synths so we can easily hear what's going on. I'll put it on all the drums for now. Okay, for our room, I'd like to have a short reverb. And maybe we've already got some presets for that. Yeah, room. Yeah, I think I'll take this one to start out with and then press the X. Okay, so on the first filter, I'll remove some high end. And then I'll decrease the decay a bit. Yeah, and on the second filter I can also remove some high end. So if we now bypass the reverb, you can clearly hear the difference. Okay, I think this works, but just to be sure, I'm gonna add a EQ 8 again. And this is a thing you always need to do, so I can just as well make a preset out of it. Remove some lows and some highs, right click, save as default. Yeah, and the low end we really don't need. The same is true for the high end. Because the high end is usually the first thing that disappears in a room, because it's absorbed. Okay, that works. And by the way, this is also the advantage of using Synths. If I were to use the reverb directly on a track with the EQ behind it, then you'll see that the EQ doesn't only apply to the reverb, but also to the dry sound itself, which is inconvenient. And also, we then need to use 5 different reverbs instead of 1. And this also costs way more CPU power. Okay, then I'll decrease the Synths. I'm just starting from 0. I only want to have separate control over all the drums. And I've shown you this in the previous video about the drum synths. So I'll quickly go over it again. Create a return chain. And send return chain A to the room reverb. And now I can send the separate tracks to the reverb. A little bit of reverb on the kick is no issue. I usually turn it up till I just notice it and then turn it down a bit. Okay, I'll also add a delay to the clap. I've made a video about this before, but I'll just unlink the two delays so I can change the delay times independently. Feedback to 0. I can turn on ping pong, remove some high end, and then play around with the delay times. And the dry wet amount. Maybe I'll turn down the spread over here a bit. Okay, just a little bit. And I'm just gonna put all the drums together in a group. So I select all the drums and press Ctrl or Command G. And that's just useful so we can easily mute the drums if you want. Oh, and the only disadvantage is that we can still hear the synths. You can disable that over here if you want. So the useful thing about groups is that you can easily apply a filter or a compressor to the whole drum group at once. And if I want, I can add some reverb to the piano. Alright, that's it for this video. Of course, I can't explain everything in one single video, so I'm gonna make a series out of this. So in the next video we'll continue adding sounds and we'll make a beginning on the arrangement. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next week with another tutorial.